Welcome to another Rust and WebAssembly Working Group meeting. Thanks for coming, everyone. All right, so to continue on with our loose 6-week sprint schedule, we are at the halfway mark now, so there's 3 more weeks, and we have 12 issues still open. So if you have been looking for ways to contribute and don't know what to do, take a look at some of these issues if they are unclaimed. Anyone want to say anything about the sprinty stuff before we move on?
I have a bunch of sprinty stuff in my section on WasmPack.
Okay. Then let's move on to status updates. So for glue, I think the big thing in my mind is that we kind of started out with this free form, let's come together, let's build stuff. And then it wasn't exactly clear what the rules of the game were, essentially, of like how to play well together. And so that's kind of been formalized a little bit, and we have some workflow documentation here. And basically this is just saying that, since we're trying to build things that are going to last very long, we're kind of focusing on a sort of design first approach. And you can go take a look at that. There's like a nice little graph viz visualization of how things work. But yeah, so take a look at that. The other question that, if you care about this, I don't want to like maybe debate it right now, but I'll point you to the thread, is there's a question of how to version like the umbrella glue crate compared to each of the toolkit crates that it re-exports, and whether they should be all together in lockstep, which would kind of be the easiest thing from a maintenance perspective. But it means that like if any crate has a breaking change, then like we arbitrarily have to breaking change everything else. And so there's a few questions there. And if you have opinions about that, please comment in the thread. And then after that, there's like been a bunch of new proposals or movement on various proposals, and I've listed, I think, most of them here. So if you are interested in how to use IndexedDB nicely from Rust, or WebSockets, or kind of reflection of objects, or using web extensions, please participate in these threads. And yeah, I think that's it. So multi-threading, any updates here?
No, only that, no changes from last time.
Cool. Debugging. I have read more of LLVM's debug info or their documentation for debug info, and I think it's really helping elucidate some of the API design problems. And yeah, so nothing concrete, but like I feel better about it.
I may have missed this from last week, but what's the goal of reading the LLVM documentation is leading towards?
I just wanted to see like how LLVM, like what their APIs for people who are writing optimization passes are to maintain debug info and all that stuff.
I see.
And kind of like what their philosophy is. It's just like kind of prior art research. Yeah, they have some nice like properties, like if you just like take in some IR and then spit the IR back out, like you always get the perfect debug info. If you like reorder stuff, you have the perfect debug info, like without having to do any work on your own. And then it's only like if you're actually making changes, do you have to like if you make some changes, then everything you didn't change still has debug info. And then if you did make some change to something, like you can choose to also add debug info, or say use the debug info from there or whatever, right? And kind of just being principled about saying like I don't know, these are the things we support. These are like, it shouldn't get in your way if you don't care about it, you know, that kind of stuff. It's been nice.
Perfect.
Yeah. All right. So WasmPack stuff. What's up?
Yes. So after I feel like a lot of inactivity, I think things have been kicking right back up, which is awesome. We sent out 0.8.0, which is cool. It wasn't a huge release, but because we had a feature, which was the renaming of the generated names that landed in WasmBindGen, we went to the minor bump. We had a small, it got a little delayed because of some shenanigans in MDBook and relative links. So I guess a PSA, make sure your local version of MDBook is 0.2 because they changed how those relative links work. And then additionally, how we write relative links on the landing page of the docs, because they also have a routed name as well. You'll potentially end up breaking them depending on which way someone's accessing that landing page. You might note that for the WasmPack docs, I decided to not solve this problem by just making the landing page of the docs a giant picture of Ferris in a hard hat. It seemed like the easiest way. And I put the README documentation in there too. It's not just a giant crab, but it is also kind of just a giant crab. We're gonna do an 0.8.1 release because with the non-rust up environment changes, it ended up breaking folks on Docker. And so Draeger already has a fix for that in. And another cool announcement is that Draeger is now co-maintainer of WasmPack. He's been doing so much freaking awesome work. It felt like it had to happen. And super great. And so one of my biggest to-dos has been to get that release checklist out. And so I'm going to be working with him on this 0.8.1 release so that he can do a whole bunch of that and we can write down the steps. So we're moving that forward. And so 0.9 is going to be our sprint release, and we have a fair amount of work to do. I've been doing a lot of the background work for the cargo generate stuff. It turns out that the cargo generate binaries I was making was actually suffering from an issue our toolchain ran into long ago about not having like .exe on the Windows binary. I don't know if you remember those issues, but that's getting fixed, and I'm releasing a new version of cargo generate today, and then I should be able to get my branch to put cargo generate into WasmPack up. Then we have the npm deps thing, which thanks to Alex filing a really awesome issue, I think that should be actually pretty quick to get out. The final thing that at least I have on my plate is this thing that we've been holding on to for a while, which is this isomorphic target. If you aren't familiar with this, it's people have been asking to be able to create an npm package that would work both like, you know, as an ES6 module, as not an ES6 module, and on Node. And just like, we have all of those options, but having WasmPack create a single package that has all of those things in it. As far as hitting the 0.9 deadline, I'm worried that that one might slip with it being on my plate. So if there's someone who's really excited about that, I can help share the work that like FitzGen, Alex, and I did in talking about how that should work with some folks. And then the next two things that don't really have owners right now is WasmOpt integration and creating an npm package to npm install WasmPack. That last one in particular, like if we have JavaScript folks, like that's probably like a great like get started contributing to WasmPack one, because it's not really about WasmPack, it's more about creating an npm package. But that's where we're at with stuff. I don't know if folks have questions or comments.
So for the WasmOpt integration, did we get the upstream deployment binary stuff figured out?
We did, and I also noticed that my original patch broke their CI. So I think Alex took care of that, which is very good.
To expand on that, we're trying really hard to get the support in upstream to use their binaries as opposed to having a local fork ourselves and working off of that branch. And so I'm working through that. It's in progress and it's moving slowly, but it's getting there.
Cool.
I will comment on the issue about WASMPack for WASMPack using WASMopt when it's ready to go, and that'll have information about the releases and what URLs to use and all that good stuff.
Cool. I was going to say, for anybody who would want to start working on this WASMopt integration, you could start a PR with the assumption that WASMopt is like in your path, and then the whole like install WASMopt bit from binary can be done a little bit later. But there's like definitely some stuff with like configuration and command line arguments that we can do, and like we can just kind of assume it will be there and then do that at the end would be my strategy. So if someone does want to start working on that, there's ways to do it with the binary not being there quite yet, as long as we can anticipate it will be there eventually.
So we aren't going to ever put it on path, right? Like we're going to use our normal install stuff. So maybe
right.
It makes sense to just have like the function that's like get the WASM-opt binary. Just it would initially do which, essentially, right? To like find the one on the path, and then that would be the thing that's just replaced.
Yeah, I mean, the distance between, just because I've recently done this with Cargo Generate and a bunch of other things, I have a tool that now uses WASMPack as one of these things. Writing it as if you can assume it in path and then switching it to use binary install is actually not really a difficult developer experience. It's pretty good. So kudos to all the binary install developers. That worked out well.
Nice.
A quick question regarding the NPM release. Would it make sense for the working group to claim a namespace on NPM for all future tools we want to release?
So, one, I think that's a cool idea. Two, Sven, who is not on this call, because I think he's at his orientation for Cloudflare right now. Sven has a namespace. I forget exactly what it is, but it's like vaguely WebAssembly Rust related. I think he's been kind of building everything out that he's been working on there. So we may need to reconcile that, but I think it's a reasonable idea. I don't know if we've squatted Rust WASM or anything yet.
Are you thinking of his WebAssembly JS namespace?
Oh, that's what I'm thinking of. I guess it's not as Rusty related.
Yeah. That seems like maybe a smart thing to do.
I think it's a good idea.
I'm going to look and see if it exists yet. Okay, it does. So my bet is one of us squatted it when we thought about this a long time ago, but I don't remember who.
Interesting. It doesn't let you see who owns it or anything?
It doesn't appear to. I just see org rustwasm packages 0. So my bet is that I think it was probably me. We'll find out. Worst case, there's friends at NPM, and we can try and figure it out. Because I imagine we'd want the same name as our GitHub.
Yeah, that would be probably ideal.
Cool. Yeah. And I guess just along those lines, I think we've started doing some of this. I was poking around at the governance repo a couple days ago because I wanted to, set up the WASMPack team, make sure Draeger was on like the maintainer team, and we probably will want slightly more teams defined in there, just so we can hand out crate publishing permissions and maybe NPM package publishing permissions similarly, like by a team structure. But we don't have to work that out here, just floating that idea.
Word. Are we ready to move on?
I guess the one thing I have is like, so I am, of the things that are on the plate for 0.9.0 that I'm worried will slip is that isomorphic packages thing. And I can imagine that could be multiple PRs, or it could be one big one. Is there anyone here who would be interested in taking a stab at that? It's going to involve a lot of like understanding modules in JS kind of situation and like build steps. If not, we'll see what happens. I would definitely want to try and get it done because we've wanted to do it for so freaking long. But I feel, yeah.
Is it easier to maybe like as an incremental step to get there to allow specifying multiple dash target options that generate this into the same PKG?
The trick with that is that we would generate multiple package JSONs. And then,
right, so we need to be able to merge package JSONs either way.
Which, I mean, being able to merge package JSONs is going to be a thing that comes with the npm deps thing. And as far as steps go, I definitely think the npm dependency bit is going to, I don't know if it'll necessarily complicate it, but it seemed, at least in my head, to be a thing to do before doing this isomorphic packages thing. Just because now we're modifying package JSON a whole ton, and like how we're going to deal with those dependencies for each of these different ones might be different. I think the original iterative step that we had thought of for that isomorphic one was that we would generate 3 different packages, like have 3 different directories, or that package directory would have 3 directories inside of it that has the 3 different ones. I'm not sure I love that, but I don't know. If we're okay with it slipping, it would be the top priority for 010. But I don't know. Maybe the first 2 shouldn't be too difficult, and that we still have 3 weeks. But
yeah, I mean, I don't know. The 3 weeks is also like, you know, arbitrary, right?
Oh yeah, sure.
So.
Deadlines are motivating to me, so I'm trying to stick by them.
Okay. All right. So I had one thing I wanted to just sound off against everyone with regards to the WASM weight tracker and integration with Glue. I think it would be nice for the Glue project to be able to measure like every individual utility crate, kind of like what its weight impact is, just to keep an eye on it for ourselves. But I think this would quickly add up to a lot of test cases for the weight tracker. And I don't know how people feel about that, if that would be like too much noise or something like that.
I would personally think it's fine. It would add up a lot of noise if we only edited exactly as is today, but I suspect there's many ways we can view the data and figure out a better way to, given lots of data, still view it in a productive fashion.
Yeah. We could also probably just have an accordion for the Glue utility crates where it's like, we don't show them by default, but you know, if you're interested in that, expand.
Yeah, I think that sounds great. We should, as much data as we can see sounds good, especially if we can just have a pretty primitive way to collapse stuff that might be distracting.
Cool. Okay, so I will look into that some more. Alex, you have an agenda item.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up the WASI target and Rust. It's not really related so much to the JS ecosystem that we're working in right now, but if you're curious about WASI and Rust, I don't know. Well, I guess one thing I wanted to ask as well is, so this WASI target came out of this concept of WASI, which is a system interface to WebAssembly, so a portable set of APIs for dealing with the file system and all that good business. Did we want to consider this being under the working group? Like, do we want to have discussions related to WASI on like the team repo and maybe have repos around that, or do we still want to? Would we prefer to relegate this more so to some other body? I don't know what, but so someone else. In terms of like most of what we've been doing right now and what Rust and WebAssembly within the working group has been largely JavaScript related and kind of the web related aspect, and not so much the embedded everywhere else kind of aspect.
Yeah, so I think different parts of it make sense for us to deal with. Like I see a future, it's not exactly clear like what the details are or the path to get there is, but I see a future where like our web targeting WASM is still using the WASI target because it gets you a lot of things kind of by default, like printing the standard out or whatever. and so like in that sense, like it is very relevant to even the use cases that we've been focusing on. I don't know. I guess I would ask like which parts of like WASI related development are you thinking about when you ask this question?
Yeah, that's a good point in the sense that I don't think we will need WASI as a target may not require as much of an ecosystem around it as the unknown target because we need tooling with WASM-Bindgen and WASM-Pack, but all that is not really necessary on the WASI target depending on what you're doing. And then but yes, so as of right now, I don't really actually have any open questions about the WASI target other than I think there's a lot of design work around it itself, but that is not this group. That is not Rust and WASI. That is WASI, and so we'll have our own dedicated group for that.
Yeah, I mean, I do definitely think that there's going to be, like, I'm not sure if I would necessarily want there to be another group spun up, because I feel like that would end up, we have this thing in Rust where the groups kind of become silos and cross-team communication's rough, though I know we're working on it. But I could imagine that there'd be at least a fair amount of overlap, at least as far as people interested and then like skills. And WASI has the polyfill for the browser, and I don't know. I think it would be interesting, maybe just as an initial thing, to try and vaguely keep it in the same group and have there then be subgroups, because then at least like where there's crossover, it'll be a lot easier to facilitate that communication.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Sort of adding to that, I think like the ecosystem will likely want to work for both targets mostly. Like isomorphic JavaScript is definitely a thing. Isomorphic Rust, probably people will want that.
Strong agree.
I mean, I think also like from our perspective, it's just going to be fairly easy, right? Like we just have WASMs that have these imports that are the WASI imports. And like, we don't really care how they're implemented as far as like the compiler goes, right? And then it's like, oh, I'm including the JS polyfill for WASI on the web, or like, you know, I'm, you know, WASM time and I'm, or Cloudflare or something like that, and I'm providing some other implementation. But like the whole point is like, it's an interface that we code against the interface, and we don't have to know about the other side. So like, I don't know.
I can imagine that our dev tools, like if we start seeing like crates that target WASI or crates that target the unknown, like I could see our dev tools wanting to help manage the polyfills for people. And like in that sense, I think it's really important to keep that communication open to like exactly what's going on with those polyfills and what we want to do with them.
Right.
So,
yeah. It's like
I'm sure, that will be the case. I know in the last meeting, Alex, which you weren't here, welcome back from South America. Fitzgen, you had mentioned that we might just like kind of with our toolchain just start targeting WASI.
Eventually, I think so.
Cool.
I mean, like, you know, there hasn't been discussion other than
We're skeptical of that, but we'll see.
You're skeptical? Interesting. I'm very unskeptical. I was initially skeptical, and I've only grown less skeptical.
Well, this is why the group should be together, because it sounds like there's some conversations to have.
All right. Well, in any case, I don't have any specific things to talk about WASI, but it sounds cool to me. We're all kind of in agreement that we will de facto be the WASI group as well for Rust, like specifically Rust and WASI in those interactions.
I think so. And if our meetings end up having like 50 people in them, that sounds like a good problem to have. And we'll do sub-working groups and it'll be fine.
Yeah. Okay, well then, along those lines, one thing I would, as a status update for WASI, is that we do have a WASM32 unknown WASI target on nightly now. So if you rest update nightly and add that target, you should be good to go. And it's not currently set up to, it may or may not work with WASM-Bindgen and WASM-Pack. I kind of doubt it does, but it's not really in, anyway. So if you want to play around with it, it's there. A PR just landed today to add some more, actually add the file system support. So now you can also touch the file system. And so if you want to go gangbusters, feel free to try that out and give us feedback.
Is it still dependent on a fork of libc that belongs to you?
No, that was,
Okay.
that's all been merged upstream.
Okay, because I saw that in the original PR and I was like, ooh, that'll be fun.
Yeah, no, that's all been sorted out.
Nice.
So I wanted to bring up one thing. I probably should have added it as an agenda item, but it actually just came back to mind. I was thinking about it previously. But before I do that, I wanted to ask one question about the WASI stuff. And maybe this is actually central to the conversation that has been taking place right now, but how much overlap are we expecting there to be between the BindGen ecosystem and WASI? Because it sounds like WASI is kind of a more standardized approach of saying, here are the APIs that are available by the system that's providing the interface, versus BindGen is like, this is specifically for the browser, at least, you know, based on what I know of it so far, the amount that I've used it. How much overlap are we expecting to be between those two ecosystems, if you will?
I would say that for the near term, we probably won't see a ton of overlap. And this is where the main use cases for WASI right now, I think, is basically Fastly and then local WASM time development, or kind of like the portable binary aspect. And so that use case hasn't really developed to the point where you want to have a lot of cross-pollination between the web and WASI. And so, but I suspect that will develop over time. And then also a fundamental limitation of WASI is that the way that it's architected, it does require a polyfill to run on the web. And so if your goal is the absolute smallest piece of WebAssembly and JS to run on your application, WASI is probably not what you want, because that polyfill will inherently be adding some cost. Now, if you can stomach the cost, then I think it'll work great. But so that's where, at the very immediate from the outset, I think it's going to be tough to see a lot of overlap. But as Nick says, and I suspect as many browsers will go, the intention of WASI in the long term is that everyone kind of natively implements it. So Node would natively implement this, so you wouldn't. WASM binding would be way less necessary on Node, because you could just do raw syscalls that are more powerful or even faster than the JS versions. And maybe the web, like maybe browsers will eventually have a native implementation of WASI. So very long term, we might see a lot of overlap. That's my perspective, at least. I don't know if y'all want to add some more.
I have a couple of thoughts.
Everybody at the same time.
Ashley first.
Oh, I mean, I guess I was just thinking, like, the way I could see, like, quickly there being some overlap is with these binaries. We're building out all of this HTML, kind of CSS, JavaScript shenanigans, building UIs for these native binaries. I could see people going kind of like an electronic kind of route. And so the UIs in these binaries, and then us doing this web interface stuff, I could see a really huge quick win if we could get that working sooner than later, because people would probably want to use that. And building UI frameworks has historically not been terribly successful in Rust. So like, we have a lot of stuff that probably people would want to use. So.
So I had a couple things to say about, like, the cost of the polyfill, I think, can be reduced a lot by doing some sort of like tree shaking or dead code elimination. I think there's multiple ways we could do this. Like, one way could be like WASM BindGen could look at which WASI imports you're relying on, and then provide the JS like the polyfills on a as needed basis for individual imports. And I think like Webpack does that kind of stuff as well, as other JS bundlers do too. So I don't think it's actually like that huge of a cost. And then the other thing I wanted to say was just like WASI is a certain set of kind of like libc-ish like import functionality, right? But like, if you want other import functionality, like interacting with JavaScript, that's where WASM BindGen comes in. And they shouldn't be like mutually exclusive with each other, right? Like, you should be able to use WASI's standard out and import, document.querySelectorAll. And so, although they're both dealing with like importing functionality from the host, I don't think they step on each other's toes, really. And even in like, a future world where, we have host bindings or WebIDL bindings, as they're being renamed, and like WASI, and it's all available in browsers and stuff, like, you'll still probably be using those WebIDL bindings somehow with WASM BindGen. And then the WASI stuff you'll be targeting through the Rust target, and everything will be working together happily. least that's kind of how I'm seeing it in my head.
What I would love to see is sort of a future that I'm envisioning is actually more on the WASM pack side, where it currently provides nice facilities for testing in the browser with the drivers and all that stuff. Like I really like that experience there for like end users. It would be awesome if we could provide something similar for WASI, that you don't really have to care like what's going on under the hood. Just like, oh, cool, I target WASI, I can test it, I can build it. And as we're like moving these things into cargo, also it like provides a nice path forward, not in the near future, but like a direction we're heading in, which I think might be nice.
I mean, I definitely think that with WASM pack, like people are already upset that they can't make packages to target all of the JavaScript things. People are probably going to, the second like the WASI runtimes kick off, people are going to want to be able to leverage that too. And so I feel like, I mean, I guess there's a universe where we make another tool and it does the WASI stuff, but like, I feel like I could see a future where it fits squarely into what WASM pack is trying to do.
I think another way to summarize a lot of this is that if WASM bindgen is stepping on WASI's toes, or the other way around, that's a bug we want to fix. So we want, these should always be interoperable, and there should always be, if you want overlap, it works. If you don't want overlap, it should also work, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see a future where people are going to want to be able to have their WebAssembly interact with JavaScript and also interact with the system. Like, we can decide whether or not we think that's a good idea, but people will want to do it.
But I do think today, Nick, correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't the polyfill always run the WASM in a web worker?
I don't know.
I am pretty sure that's the case based on when I was looking at it. That's what it appeared to do.
That's
That
really
is
surprising.
Well, it's just the blocking aspect where like you can't implement a blocking file system API if you're not on a web worker, that kind of stuff. But that would be one example of how they may not be working great together today, because WASM bindgen tends to assume you're running on the main thread or unless otherwise stated, and so that was something that will probably be developed over time and probably improve over time as well.
Similar to that, I don't know, this is like a little bit more off topic, but one thing that I haven't been following as well as I want to is the WebAssembly modules proposal. And I did recently at least look at what was available to read on the internet. And it sounded like one of the proposals was to load your WebAssembly like module via a web worker. And I thought that was a very interesting thing to do. So I'm not sure. I have to do more research, but would people be against like having a section of this meeting where we like check in on some of the community group stuff that would like affect us? When FitzGen did a little one on the host bindings proposal, which has a new name now, right? I keep not remembering it. Like,
I don't think the pull request is merged as far as I know, but like it seems like pretty much guaranteed that it's going to be called WebIDL bindings now.
Okay, yeah, I remembered that it had a new name and it was like WebIDL something, and I couldn't find it because all of the at least merged stuff says host bindings. But just keeping up with those and just having a little mention of it in the meeting seems like a really useful thing to do.
Yeah, I would definitely encourage anyone who notices like a relevant update to other specs to like throw agenda items into the agenda.
Cool. I will do my best to do that for next week because it's something I'm trying to focus on a little bit more recently.
Cool. So one other thing I wanted to bring up, and feel free to just cut me off if you need to, if I'm taking too much time here. But I know we had some discussion about this, like it was last year, I think late last year at some point, kind of early days for the working group, I think. But we had a little bit of discussion about kind of the story for the React Native-like ecosystem as far as Rust and WASM is concerned. And I think that's a really big area where we could be very successful and have a really big impact because, right now we're targeting primarily the JavaScript ecosystem, building things that will run in the browser to kind of supplement standard JavaScript. And that's exactly what React Native did for JavaScript to native. So I was wondering if anybody has thoughts on that, and especially Ashley, I wanted to ask you, do you think it would be possible or a good idea maybe to do something like with WasmPack, where we can generate the native interface for Android or iOS like Swift, so that we can create very easy bundles, because that would provide kind of what Yash was saying about providing, a nice testing framework and different things like that, except instead of browser, this would be React Native style, which is, I think, depending on the platform, is still running in the browser, but just packaged as a native app for those platforms. Do you guys have any thoughts on that? I just wanted to bring it up for discussion.
My first thought is I'm certainly not against it. I don't know what those interfaces look like today. And so I'm not in a great position to be able to evaluate how difficult it would be to do. So I would just strongly encourage you to, if you could just open an issue, and like the easiest thing to do is just like dump what you think those interfaces should be. And then we can like kind of pick it apart from there. Long ago, like way before React even existed, I worked with PhoneGap, which was like the OG, like native, but like actually just browser stuff on the phone. And I always thought that kind of technology was super empowering, and React Native is at least popular enough that people have strong opinions about it. So I would be happy to check it out. But yeah, I don't know what those interfaces look like anymore.
Yeah, I'm happy to put some stuff together. I guess I'm just kind of wondering where a good place would be to start some discussion on that, because PhoneGap, yeah, that's like the canonical example, and then React Native uses a very similar mechanism for being able to run the bundled code on, Android or iOS, or I think Windows is supported as well. I'm not sure. But I would be happy to start some discussion.
I think starting it in WasmPack makes the most sense, and then depending from there, like we can poke at it, and like there may be some stuff that we think that actually should be WasmBindgen's job, and then we can like drop those down to WasmBindgen. I don't know, Alex, what you think of that? Again, I don't entirely know. What's up, Bitchin?
I have questions about, like, I guess what we're envisioning here. Are we thinking like how to use WASM with React Native so that you can kind of use this everywhere React Native is used? Or are you thinking like I have a WASM module with a set of imports, and I implement those imports on iOS, and I implement those imports on Android, and I implement those imports on the web to provide like the same UI framework?
Yeah, so and I'll clarify this in the agenda item that I wrote there, but I definitely see this as something separate from React Native or any of the other like current JavaScript implementations for getting into the native environment. But basically leveraging what we're doing in the WebAssembly ecosystem and the Bindgen work that's been done, and Glue as well would be obviously a part of that, but then being able to basically take the same route of any JavaScript and WebAssembly that we have would run in the browser on one of these devices, but packaged as a native app, which is the approach that React Native and PhoneGap and such takes. So it's kind of our way of saying, hey, this is essentially the same concept, but it would provide us a way to tie into the lower level APIs that the devices provide. And that's where something like WasmPack would be beautiful, because we could just generate those bindings for Java through the JNI, or Swift through a standard C interface. So yeah, to answer your question directly, Nick, basically outside of the React Native context specifically.
Are you assuming a JavaScript host to interact with as well?
It would. So I'll double check, but when the last few React Native like apps that I've built, it was all a browser host. So it's packaged as a native app, but actually runs in either Safari, like the Safari backbone browser, or on Android, I think in Chrome.
Yeah, my understanding is that these are kind of exactly like PhoneGap, which is like, it's like React Native is like React pretending to be native. And so that's why I'm kind of thinking that like this, like what we could end up with is like Glue native, and it's largely a packaging issue. And there are some other things, and those are the things that I'm like, please write those in the issue, because I need to figure out what those things are. But I think it's largely packaging.
Yeah, agreed.
Like looking up a couple of things in the background.
I was sort of always curious, like a thing that I really like about Rust is how you can target all these different targets. And one of those like two of those targets include C and also Java. So what I was always like curious about, like we have WASM pack and WASM bindgen to target WASM specifically, but I can sort of see like a parallel toolchain targeting like iOS and targeting like Java, but providing very similar semantics. So I'm kind of curious, like, instead of like focusing on doing this through WASM and emulating what React Native does, which is constrained by JavaScript, who can't do that, if instead building a parallel toolchain might be like a cleaner solution, maybe?
Yeah, so so Cloudflare just released a Rust-based iOS app, which, or I guess it's in like beta right now, but their new like Warp product is all written in Rust targeting iOS. And it is extremely true that a nice developer experience for that does not currently exist in Rust. At least they didn't find it, and I'm not aware of it. I think the thing that we target here is for people who have web apps and web presence already, who want to have native stuff and want to kind of use the same thing. And I think it largely comes down to like what you want to write your UI in. Like, do you want to be writing web technologies? And like that way you're like kind of targeting the browser, or do you want to write it in like an actual UI framework, like in Xcode? And that is depending on the like team of developers you have. Sometimes that like actual native situation is like not possible. And my understanding is that the UI frameworks in Rust are not very good. And this is not to denigrate anyone. I only know this because people complain about them to me all the time. I don't have any actual firsthand experience, but people are like, the UI frameworks. And I'm like, I'm sorry. So if we're like building out, this is kind of coming back to that whole WASI thing. It's just like, if we can like do HTML and that kind of stuff and do it well in the Rust WebAssembly world, then that gives this like interesting cheat to like be able to do UI with developers who understand this like one specific thing. You are right that it is like a little bit bonkers that people would choose to do this, but this dream of like, I write web apps, but I can also write apps, there's just like a huge audience for it. I could probably make up reasons as to why that audience exists, but it is true that that audience exists. But
yeah, I think
that's a lot to say. Like, I agree with you, Yash, but like, there's people who really want this.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you said, Ashley. I think that was really well said, and that's exactly what I had in mind as well. Is instead of just being able to take Rust and then compile it directly to the Java or iOS platform, so that you can just run that and use your own windowing tools and stuff like that, or layering like a Swift UI kit or a Java Android stack on top of it for the UI, basically being able to leverage all of the great work that this group has done with Glue and WASM bindgen and such, so that we can actually leverage the web-based UI systems for this application. So that's exactly what I had in mind. And yeah, that's kind of where I saw the separation between those two things as well. So
people definitely want that iOS Android toolchain though. So we should form a new working group for that. I'm getting a lot of pressure from Cloudflare for it. And I'm like, I can't do another working group.
Be awesome if Cloudflare would spend some engineering time on that. That would like be really, really cool.
I agree. They're at least paying me to be in this meeting, so.
Awesome. Well, I'll go ahead and pop a new issue in WASM Pack and just dump some thoughts there and kind of get the conversation started and see where it goes.
Cool. The real key thing is just to like specify whatever that like interface or like target interface we would need to get to would be.
All right. Any other agenda items? Okay, I think we are all done then. Yeah. All right. Thanks for coming to the meeting, y'all, and see you around.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.